Welcome back. Tonight's story begins with a moment so unthinkable, so heart-wrenching, it would haunt three innocent lives for years to come. Brighton Mercy Medical Center, Virginia. The air in the delivery room was thick with anticipation, sterile yet electric, as the cries of newborns pierced the silence. Three tiny figures, two girls and a boy, squirmed beneath the fluorescent glow, their soft, dark skin glistening with the first breaths of life. A nurse, smiling warmly, swaddled them in crisp white blankets, ready to place them into the arms of their waiting parents. But the joy in the room flickered and died in an instant. Daniel and Rebecca Lawson stood frozen, their faces pale, their hands clenched into fists at their sides. The world around them seemed to tilt as they took in the sight before them. Three babies, their babies, but they didn't look like them. Rebecca's breath hitched, her heartbeat a frantic drum against her ribs. She turned to Daniel, searching his face for some kind of reassurance, but found only cold, sharp disbelief. His jaw tightened, his nostrils flared, and then he stepped back. The nurse hesitated. "They're beautiful," she whispered, her voice like a fragile thread, stretching across the chasm of silence. But the words fell flat, swallowed whole by the unspoken horror in Rebecca's eyes. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible. The air felt suddenly too thick, suffocating. The walls of the room seemed to close in. Rebecca's fingers twitched toward the nearest baby, then curled away, as if the child might burn her. Daniel exhaled sharply, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "We need time to think." His tone was final. No room for argument, no hesitation, no warmth. And with that, he turned, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Rebecca lingered for a moment longer, her lips parting as if to speak. Then she, too, walked away. Three fragile souls left behind. No name, no embrace, no second glance. Just the sound of their cries, unanswered, as the door swung shut. But fate had other plans. The rain drummed softly against the roof of a modest house in Summit Hill, North Carolina, its rhythm steady, almost hypnotic. Inside, the glow of the living room lamp cast long shadows on the walls, flickering over the framed photographs lining the mantel, each capturing moments of love, of laughter, of a family that had fought for its existence. Michael and Vanessa Carter sat on the couch, their hands intertwined, their eyes flickering between the three sleeping figures nestled on a thick blanket on the floor. Even in sleep, the triplets clung to each other, their small fingers intertwined, as if some part of them still feared being separated. Vanessa exhaled slowly, brushing a stray curl from her face. "Can you believe it's been 17 years? Her voice was barely above a whisper, carrying a weight only Michael could understand. His gaze softened as he studied their children, Noah, Maya, and Layla. So different yet so much the same, bound by something stronger than blood. "No," he admitted, running a hand over his jaw. "It feels like just yesterday we brought them home." They had been fragile then, three tiny souls abandoned in a hospital nursery, unwanted by the people who created them. But love had rewritten that story. Michael and Vanessa hadn't just adopted them. They had fought for them, protected them, given them everything. And yet as the years passed, they had come to realize that love alone wasn't always enough. The first time it happened, Maya had been 6. A classmate had asked, innocently enough, "Why don't you look like your parents?" A harmless question on the surface, but one that had burrowed deep. That night she had sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her reflection, running small fingers over her dark curls. Vanessa had knelt beside her, smoothing a hand down her back. "Because love doesn't look like anything," she had said. But that answer had only worked for so long. By 10, the questions had grown sharper, the whispers more pointed. "Are you adopted? Where are your real parents?" The triplets had learned to shrug it off, but the weight of those words followed them like shadows. Noah withdrew into silence. Maya searched for answers in books, and Layla fought back with fire in her voice. Now at 17, the questions no longer came from strangers. They came from within. Noah sat at the piano, fingers hesitating over the keys before pressing down, slow and deliberate, each note laced with something unspoken. Maya hovered over her laptop, her search history filled with fragments of a past she couldn't remember. Layla paced the room, restless, her body vibrating with an anger she didn't know how to name. Tonight, the silence between them was heavy, thick with something that had been building for years. Maya was the first to break it. "We need to know," she said, her voice steady but laced with something fragile. Noah exhaled sharply, pressing the heel of his palm against his forehead. "Maya, no," she cut in. "No more pretending. No more avoiding it. We need to know who they are, and we need to know why they left us." The words settled between them like a challenge. Layla stopped pacing. Noah lowered his hand. Vanessa and Michael exchanged a glance, one that held 17 years of love, but also the quiet, aching fear that this day would come. Michael leaned forward, his voice low, measured. "Are you sure?" Maya met his gaze. "We have to be." A long pause. Then Vanessa exhaled, her shoulders falling. She reached for a small box on the bookshelf, pulling it down with slow, deliberate movements. It was old, worn at the edges, a relic of a past they had tried to keep locked away. Inside was a file, a name, an address. Noah's fingers tightened into a fist. Maya's breath hitched. Layla's jaw clenched. This was it. The past they had spent their whole lives running from was now staring back at them, and there was no turning back. The wind howled through the empty streets of Summit Hill, North Carolina, rattling street signs and sending fallen leaves skittering across the pavement like whispers in the dark. Inside the Carter home, the air was thick, not with warmth, not with the usual hum of conversation, but with something heavier, something charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Noah sat on the couch, his elbows on his knees, eyes locked on the worn file spread out on the coffee table. One name, one address, one truth they weren't sure they were ready for. Maya stood near the window, arms crossed, the glow of her laptop screen reflecting in her sharp eyes. "We have to go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a blade. Layla, pacing behind her, scoffed. "Yeah? And what if we don't like the answers we get?" Noah exhaled slowly, his fingers pressing into his temples. "What if we're asking the wrong questions?" Michael and Vanessa stood nearby, their presence steady but unreadable. Michael had barely spoken since they opened the file. Vanessa's hand gripped the back of a chair, her knuckles white. "This won't change anything," she said, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Maya turned. "Won't it?" The weight of her stare bore down on them. "Because I'm tired of people asking why we don't look like our parents. I'm tired of the stares, the whispers, of not knowing what's real." Layla stopped pacing. "We do know what's real," she said, gesturing toward Michael and Vanessa. "They're real. This family is real." But the crack in her voice betrayed her resolve. Noah's head snapped up. "Then why does it feel like there's something missing?" A sharp silence followed. Outside, a car rumbled down the road, its headlights sweeping across the living room walls like ghostly fingers. The weight in the air grew heavier. Vanessa finally sank into a chair, rubbing her temples. Michael let out a long breath, then walked toward the coffee table, his fingers tracing the edge of the file. He looked at each of them in turn before speaking, his voice careful, measured. "We never hid the truth from you. We just never wanted it to define you." Maya's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then let's stop pretending it doesn't exist." She grabbed the file and held it up. "Because whether we like it or not, this does define us." Michael's jaw tightened. "It only defines you if you let it." Another silence, this one darker, deeper. Then Noah stood. His fingers twitched at his sides, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded once. "We go." Layla sucked in a breath. Vanessa closed her eyes. Michael glanced at the ceiling as if searching for an answer he didn't have. Maya didn't hesitate. She grabbed her coat, snatching the car keys from the counter. "Then let's do it before we change our minds." And just like that, the past, the truth they had never dared to face, was no longer waiting for them. They were chasing it. The car's headlights sliced through the darkened streets, casting fleeting shadows against the trees lining the highway. Inside, the silence was suffocating, heavy with unsaid words. Maya sat in the passenger seat, eyes fixed on the road ahead, fingers curled tightly in her lap. The file, the name, the address, felt heavier than paper, heavier than truth. Noah gripped the wheel, his jaw clenched, his mind running through every scenario. Layla sat in the back, her knee bouncing restlessly. Every mile felt like a countdown, every passing streetlight a reminder that they were closing in on something they might not be ready to face. As they pulled onto the final stretch, the GPS announced their destination. A house loomed at the end of the street, pristine, untouched by time. White siding, a neatly trimmed hedge, the kind of house that screamed normal. But nothing about this was normal. Noah killed the engine. No one moved. Layla was the first to break the silence. Maybe this was a mistake. Maya swallowed hard. We didn't come this far to turn back. With that, she pushed the door open, stepping onto the driveway. The air was still, thick with anticipation. Layla and Noah followed, their footsteps muted against the pavement. Each step felt like stepping into a past they had never known, a past that had lived without them. Noah was the one who knocked. The sound echoed, too loud, too final. A long pause, then footsteps on the other side. The door creaked open. A man stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, older now, but unmistakable. Daniel Lawson. His face barely changed, except for the tiredness in his eyes, the stiffness in his posture. Behind him, another figure emerged. Rebecca Lawson, her hand gripping the edge of the doorframe, her face pale as if seeing ghosts. For a moment, no one spoke. No one moved. Noah's voice came first, low, steady. "You know who we are." Daniel's throat bobbed. His fingers curled at his sides. Rebecca's breath hitched. Maya took a step forward, her voice quieter, but firmer. "Why did you leave us?" Silence. A battle played out in Daniel's expression. One of shame, of resistance, of something else they couldn't name. Rebecca closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were glassy, distant. "We were afraid," she whispered. Layla's arms crossed over her chest. "Afraid of what?" "Your own kids." Daniel's gaze darkened. "Afraid of what people would say, afraid of what it would mean." His voice was rough, strained, as if the words burned on the way out. Noah exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "We spent our whole lives wondering what we did wrong. Turns out it wasn't us. It was you." Rebecca flinched. Daniel's fists tightened, but no one argued. The power shifted. The truth had begun to reveal itself, but it wasn't finished yet, and the worst was still to come. The silence stretched, thick as fog, suffocating the space between them. A car passed in the distance, its headlights flashing across their faces, momentarily casting Daniel and Rebecca Lawson in harsh, unforgiving light. The truth was here now, standing in the open, raw and unshakable. Noah felt something inside him crack, not a loud, shattering break, but a slow, splintering fracture that had been forming for years. His pulse thundered in his ears. "Afraid?" he repeated, his voice a low, simmering burn. "You abandoned us because you were afraid?" Rebecca flinched as if struck. Her hands trembled against the doorframe. Daniel's jaw was set, his fists clenched, but his eyes told the truth before his lips ever could. "We," Rebecca started, but the words strangled in her throat. "You what?" Layla's voice was sharp, pushing, demanding. "You realized we weren't white enough to be your perfect little family?" Daniel's lips parted, but no sound came. His silence was louder than any excuse. Maya took a step forward. "Say it." Daniel exhaled sharply. The fight left his shoulders. The walls he had built, the years of carefully preserved denial, cracked beneath the weight of what he could no longer hide. His voice, when it came, was hoarse, empty. "We didn't know what to do. We panicked. We thought maybe there had been a mistake." Maya let out a hollow laugh. "A mistake?" The word felt filthy, like poison in her mouth. Noah's hands curled into fists, his nails digging into his palms. "We were newborns." His voice wavered between disbelief and fury. "You didn't even give us a chance." Rebecca's face crumpled. You walked out," Layla cut in, her voice cracking, "and we weren't even worth a second glance." Daniel looked away, but there was nowhere to hide. The house behind him, The home they were supposed to grow up in, the home that had rejected them before they even had names, stood unchanged, pristine, untouched by the destruction their absence had left behind. Maya's eyes burned, but she refused to cry. "Do you ever think about us?" she whispered. Daniel's shoulders dropped. Every day, it was the truth, and somehow that only made it worse. Noah took a breath, but it did nothing to steady him. He turned to Rebecca. "Did you ever wonder if we were okay?" Tears slipped down her face. She nodded, but the motion was weak, useless. "We were cowards," she choked out. Layla scoffed. "You were selfish." The words landed heavy, final. Daniel exhaled, long and slow. "We were wrong." His voice was quiet, hollow, but not an excuse. Noah swallowed hard. His whole life he had imagined this moment, confronting the ghosts that haunted his reflection. But nothing could have prepared him for the ache that settled deep in his chest. They had their truth, but it didn't feel like victory. It just felt like the past, finally catching up. The night air was heavy, thick with the weight of everything that had been said, and everything that hadn't. The triplets stood at the edge of the porch, their backs to the house they had once belonged to, but never knew. Behind them, Daniel and Rebecca Lawson stood like statues in the doorway. Two people who had finally spoken the truth, but could never undo its damage. The confrontation was over, but the war inside each of them still raged. Noah clenched his fists, his knuckles white. His heart pounded like a distant drum, steady but relentless. He had spent years imagining this moment, a face-off with the parents who had abandoned them, a demand for answers, a final reckoning. But now that the truth was out, it didn't bring relief. It brought exhaustion. Rebecca stepped forward, her hands twisting in front of her, a plea on her lips. "I don't expect you to forgive us," she whispered, her voice raw. I need you to know that leaving you was the worst mistake of our lives." Layla let out a slow, humorless laugh. "Yeah? Too bad it took you 18 years to realize it." Maya remained silent, her face unreadable, but her eyes betrayed her. There was pain there, and something else, something softer. But it wasn't enough. Daniel, the man who had once turned his back without hesitation, now took a step closer. His posture no longer rigid, but heavy. For the first time, his voice didn't hold pride or fear, just regret. "We've spent years hiding from this," he admitted. "But the truth is, we should have fought for you. We should have been better." The words were honest, but they weren't magic. They didn't fix anything. Noah exhaled slowly, staring down at his hands, the same hands that had reached for parents who were never there. He had wanted anger to carry him through this. He had wanted a clean break, but it wasn't that simple. It never was. "I don't know what you want from us," he said finally, his voice quieter now, but no less sharp. "You can't undo what you did." Rebecca swallowed hard, nodding. "I know." Maya's arms wrapped around herself, her body suddenly feeling too small for the storm inside her. She wasn't sure what she expected from tonight. Maybe she thought knowing the truth would give her peace, but peace wasn't so easily won. Layla shook her head. "We have a family, a real one. We didn't need you then, and we don't need you now." Daniel flinched, but he nodded, accepting it. "I hope," his voice caught, and he tried again. "I hope someday we can do something to change that." The triplets didn't answer. Maybe they never would. Maya turned, walking down the steps first. Layla followed, her shoulders squared. Noah lingered for a moment, staring at the people who had given them life, but never love. Then he turned his back on them, just as they had once done to him. The drive home was silent, not the kind of silence that was awkward or empty, but the kind that carried weight, the kind that settled in deep, pressing against their chests like an old scar finally acknowledged. The road stretched ahead of them, winding through the dark, illuminated only by the rhythmic glow of passing streetlights. Noah kept his hands steady on the wheel, but his mind was a storm. Layla stared out the window, her arms crossed tight. Maya traced circles on her knee, lost in thought. It was over, and yet it wasn't. The truth had been laid bare. Their parents, no, not their parents. just the people who had left them behind, had admitted their failures. But what did it change? Did it make the years of wondering hurt any less? Did it rewrite the countless nights they had spent searching for answers? And yet, they weren't the same people who had knocked on that door hours ago. They had walked into that house with a question. They left with something bigger, a choice. Noah tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "We don't owe them anything," he said, breaking the silence. Maya nodded slowly, but her voice was softer. "But maybe we owe ourselves something," Layla scoffed. "Like what?" Maya exhaled. "Like the chance to let go." The words lingered, settling over them like the quiet hum of the tires against the asphalt. Letting go didn't mean forgiving. It didn't mean forgetting. It meant reclaiming their story, no longer being defined by the people who abandoned them, but by the ones who stayed. A notification buzzed on Maya's phone. She glanced down and froze. Their confrontation had been recorded, not by them, by someone else. The video was everywhere, shared, reposted, dissected. The internet had taken hold of their story, and it was spreading like wildfire. 3 abandoned children, now grown, confronting the parents who left them behind. The headlines were ruthless. What happens when the past comes knocking? The triplets they left behind. A reckoning 18 years in the making. Thousands of comments flooded in. Some were cruel, some were sympathetic, but all of them were watching. Layla groaned, tossing her head back. "Great, now we're viral." Maya smirked. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Because this wasn't just their story anymore. It was bigger than them. It was for every child who had ever wondered why they weren't enough. Every person who had been discarded like an afterthought. Every soul who had fought to redefine themselves beyond the pain of their past. Noah pulled into the driveway. The house, their home, stood waiting. The only place that had ever truly been theirs. Michael and Vanessa were on the porch, worry etched across their faces. But when the triplets stepped out of the car, the only thing in their parents' eyes was love. No questions, no demands, just open arms. Noah, Maya, and Layla didn't hesitate. Because family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who stays, who fights for you, who chooses you, over and over again. And they had been chosen. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe to Xdaily Stories, and join us for more gripping tales that twist, turn, and stay with you long after the credits roll. Because some stories aren't just meant to be told, they're meant to be felt.